Right now, there are a select few people that are making progress far quicker than everyone else. They seem to get better every single day and love the process. Now, you may look at these people and think that there's something different about them. There's something special that they have that you don't. Well, there is something different about them. They're addicted to progress. However, this is not a trait that they were born with. This is something they learned. Long-term progress towards any goal requires consistent execution. If you want to get in great shape, it's not about having one day where you ate perfectly and you trained perfectly. It's about having a bunch of days where you trained well and ate well. If you want to become a millionaire, it's not about working perfectly for one day for 20 hours in the day. It's about working consistently on the right things. Think about someone like Jeff Bezos, one of the richest men in the world. He didn't turn a profit on his business for nearly 10 years, but he was able to consistently stick with the inputs and execute on a daily basis. If we fundamentally dislike the work, if we fundamentally dislike what we're doing, it's going to be very, very hard for us to be consistent and execute consistently. How many of us actually like working towards our goals? How many of us actually like working out? How many of us actually like working? And how many of us are working for the weekend or working out because it's something I should do? The people that love working out, the people that love working on their business, are the people that are going to stick with it long term and see the long term results, because there's so much less friction. If you want to do something, if you crave to do a behavior, you're far more likely to do it than someone who's constantly banging their head against the wall to do anything. Being addicted to progress is what allows you to execute consistently over these long time horizons. But most of us aren't addicted to progress. Most of us are addicted to everything but progress. I mean, right now, how many of us wake up, scroll our phone? Really enjoy scrolling our phone. In fact, we're probably addicted to that. And then we realize, okay, I have to work on my business or I have to go to my job. And they really hate that. They really don't enjoy that. But then on their lunch break, they maybe get to scroll some more. They really love that. And then they go home and they get to watch some TV, which they really love. In fact, they might be addicted to that. And then, I guess I'll go to the gym. So maybe you go to the gym and you hate going to the gym. And then you get back home, maybe watch some more TV, really enjoy that, probably addicted to that. And then you go to bed and repeat it. The only things that you didn't enjoy in the day were the progress things, the things that actually move you towards your goals. If you woke up and you loved working on your business, that's all you wanted to do. You love working out, it's one of your favorite things in your life. This person is going to find it a whole lot easier to achieve their goals than the person that absolutely despises everything that is required to move them towards their goals. Well, what if there was a way of enjoying working towards your goals so much that you became addicted? Well, there is a way of doing this, and the people that make progress way faster than everyone else, this is exactly what they're doing. The way we become addicted to progress is by rewiring our reward system. Currently, default settings, our reward systems are absolutely cooked. There is not a chance on earth that you're going to become addicted to progress by accident the way your life is currently set up. It is literally impossible. If we want to rewire our reward system, we have to do a few specific things. We need to strip cheap dopamine. This is fundamentally what is destroying our reward system. We need to install real dopamine, dopamine that pushes us and moves us towards our goals. And we need to enhance that real dopamine so we truly get addicted. Right, so first of all, we're going to strip the cheap dopamine. Fundamentally, the cheap dopamine is what makes us addicted to everything but the progress. So removing that is going to be a very good start. Now, the way we should think about cheap dopamine is on this dopamine to effort continuum. Throughout our evolutionary history, we've worked on this continuum for the most part. Now, this is simplified, but it's going to make the point very, very clear. For most behaviors, the more effort that you put into a task, the more dopamine you would receive. So if you killed an animal to feed your family, right, that's an incredibly difficult task, but would produce a lot of dopamine. Something like, telling jokes around the campfire, not a lot of effort, not producing a crazy amount of dopamine. First thing we want to do is make sure our dopamine sits back on this continuum, back where we used to be. We want to be receiving dopamine proportional to the amount of effort we put in. So if you're working on your business, it's a reasonably difficult task. It produces a reasonable amount of dopamine. If you're working out, it's going to produce a reasonable amount of dopamine, and it's also going to be reasonably hard. If you decide to sit on the couch and do nothing, just stare at a wall, okay, basically zero effort, also not going to feel all that good. We want to be back here, back in this reality. But the problem is, right now, we have cheap dopamine in our lives. Now, cheap dopamine is completely alien to our environment. It's very alien to our biology because the way we've evolved to receive reward relative to the amount of effort we put in, the amount that something contributes to our life. But with the introduction of cheap dopamine, what happens is you can put in essentially zero effort. In fact, it should probably be more like this, as close to zero effort as possible, and feel absolutely amazing. Produce a really high amount of dopamine. The reason this is so dangerous is that if you constantly have the option and the choice to do something that is really, really easy and feels really good, why would you want to work? Why would you want to do something that's hard, much harder than scrolling your phone or watching TV, but also produces less dopamine? You're just never, ever, ever going to want to do that. And this is fundamentally why cheap dopamine has hijacked our reward system and has made our brain in a way where we are addicted to everything but the progress. Because cheap dopamine, when we think about it, scrolling your phone, playing video games, binge watching TV shows, these kind of things are not moving you towards any real goals. Let's be honest. None of these things are moving you towards your goals. However, they're definitely sitting way, way off the spectrum on the effort to reward. This means that you're addicted to things that are not moving you towards your goals whatsoever. If we compare cheap dopamine to real dopamine, it's going to become very obvious how this is really impacting our reward system and why we are wired in a way that makes it impossible to be addicted to progress. So if we have a look at cheap versus real, the amount of effort required to produce cheap dopamine is very, very little. Very low effort compared to real dopamine, which is more effort. This means that surely cheap dopamine produces less dopamine than real dopamine. No, cheap dopamine produces more than real dopamine. So not only is it easier, but it also feels better. This means that your default decision, what your brain is going to naturally gravitate towards, is going to be cheap dopamine. This is just the natural, obvious option because it's easy and it feels good. Why is it going to choose something that's hard and doesn't feel so good? So this means that, of course, real dopamine is not going to be the default option. If you are truly just listening to your lizard brain, there is not a chance on earth that you're going to be consciously choosing real dopamine ever. So this means that you're probably going to start getting addicted to cheap dopamine. Think about all of the drug addicts in the world. Think about people who are addicted to smoking cigarettes or are alcoholics. What are they addicted to? They're addicted to doing easy things that make them feel really good. That is this. That is exactly what this is, right? Of course you're going to become addicted to this. And of course, as a consequence, no way you're going to be addicted to real dopamine. If we just remove cheap dopamine, it is going to very much change how real dopamine works for us. The effort required for real dopamine, it's not going to change that much. It might be a bit easier because you have less options, but fundamentally, it's the same task. It's not going to be any easier or harder necessarily. However, the dopamine produced will be a little bit better. It's about on par, right? It's the amount of dopamine it should produce. Now, I'm not going to go too deep into the neuroscience of this, but what essentially happens is when you remove cheap dopamine, you increase the amount of total dopamine that your brain produces. So your brain has to naturally produce a bit more dopamine. So this means that real dopamine is going to produce what it should, right? The normal amount of dopamine. The big thing that removing cheap dopamine does is that it makes real dopamine your default decision, your automatic go-to decision. Because what you've done is you've brought yourself back in this continuum. You've brought yourself back to where everything lies on this regular path, where the more effort you put in, the more dopamine is produced. So naturally, you're going to want to seek the things that produce more dopamine. And because you have no anchor, you don't have this cheap dopamine option, these are going to become your best decisions. Now, this is great. These are going to be your default decisions, but you're not going to be addicted to these behaviors. You're not going to hate them. You're not going to absolutely love them. They're just another viable option. And this is fine. This is a far better place than most people are. In fact, I would argue that this is a huge competitive advantage, but you're not quite in the sweet spot because we're not yet addicted. If we want to be able to execute really consistently over very long time horizons, Being addicted is going to be the difference maker. And if we want to be addicted, we have to do a few more things. The first of those things is installing real dopamine. Now that we've removed all of the terrible, cheap dopamine, we want to add real dopamine that we actually want to be addicted to. There's lots of things that you can enjoy doing and you can get addicted to, but we want to choose the ones that we actually really want to get addicted to, the actions that are really going to move us forwards towards our goals. So it's very important that we choose wisely how we want to receive our real dopamine. Now, when I think about installing real dopamine, I think about finding the perfect intersection between three specific characteristics. The first one is having a personal goal. This is the obvious start. You want to choose a personal goal that you genuinely want to achieve. The second characteristic is choosing real dopamine that has long-term potential. There's a few reasons for this. First of all, if you're choosing a goal that could be accomplished in a few weeks or a few months, is it a goal worth achieving? We want to choose goals that can have big impacts on our life over long time horizons. And how many goals that can be done in a few weeks or a few months can do that? That's the first thing. But the other thing is, think about what you're currently addicted to. You're probably currently addicted to scrolling your phone. How many years have you been scrolling your phone for? You might be addicted to binge watching TV shows or binge watching YouTube. How many years have you been doing this for? The requirement for getting addicted is putting a lot of reps in, really building up a habit. And if these are inputs and actions that are going to be done in a few weeks or a few months, you're not going to really build that addiction that we're looking for. So choosing a personal goal that has long-term potential is really important. Next thing is choosing an 80-20 input. This is very important. So what is an 80-20 input? Well, an 80-20 input follows the 80-20 principle that states that 20% of the work accomplishes 80% of the goals, while the other 80% of work produces 20% of the goals. What we're trying to do is choose the inputs, choose the work that is actually going to make a big difference, have a huge impact on your growth, on your movement towards your goals. If our goal is to get in great shape, it's not about getting addicted to taking magnesium tablets and fish oils. It's not about becoming addicted to eating organic foods. It's about becoming addicted to doing the workouts and sleeping really well and eating enough protein, right? It's about doing the 80-20 levers that are gonna actually have a big impact, not the tiny little things that are gonna not have much difference. This is what's gonna separate the good from the great here. Because if you get addicted to nitpicking and doing the little things that have little impact, you're gonna fill your day with nonsense. If you wanna make really fast progress, then get addicted to the things that actually matter, and these are gonna be the 80-20 inputs. And when you can combine a personal goal that has a lot of long-term potential with an 80-20 input for that personal goal with long-term potential, you land yourself right in the sweet spot here. This is exactly what we want to become addicted to. This is the real dopamine that we want to install, because if we get addicted to consistently executing on these behaviors over long time horizons, we win, right? You will achieve your goals. It is a guarantee over a long enough period of time, assuming that you're actually doing 80-20 inputs. Right, now we've got rid of the cheap dopamine. We've removed the things that are destroying our reward system, making us addicted to everything but the goals. Good. Now we've also added real dopamine. We've added the inputs, the real dopamine that's genuinely gonna move us towards our goals. The last thing to do to make us really addicted to this dopamine is to enhance the real dopamine. Now we're back in reality, we're back on the effort to dopamine continuum, okay? The work, the real dopamine moving us towards our goals, it's sitting nicely here. Maybe these are your default decisions at the moment. Good place to be in. But we wanna become addicted. Now, what made us addicted to cheap dopamine in the first place? Well, what made us addicted was the fact that it produced far more dopamine than the effort that we had to actually put in. So how do we do that for real dopamine? How do we do that for the things that actually move us towards our goals, the big needle movers? If we can do this, we can now become addicted to the big 80-20s. This is where we enhance the real dopamine. This is where we bring it back off the continuum, so we're producing more dopamine for the effort we put in. This is how we get addicted. This is how this will 100% be your default thing to do. This is what we want to do. Now, how do we enhance real dopamine? Well, the way we do that is we intentionally bring in things from our natural environment that stimulate and produce extra dopamine. For example, if you want to get addicted to doing 80-20 activities that move you forward in your business, the 80-20 work, then Drink a cup of coffee right before you do the work. The coffee is going to centralize your dopamine, allow you to produce more dopamine while you work, so you feel especially good while you're doing the work. If you've now removed all the cheap dopamine, you've probably removed your ability to just listen to music all the time, right? The dopamine plug of just having the ability to always feel good and listen to music. If you've cut out music completely and you want to progress forwards in the gym or in running, then listen to music while you're in the gym or when you're running, and then don't listen to it anywhere else. This enhances those experiences significantly. Music is a very, very easy dopamine enhancer, and if you can leverage it when you actually want to feel good, when you want to reward certain behaviors, this is how we push the dopamine up off the spectrum and become addicted to it. Our goal is to enhance our experiences as much as possible when we're doing things that are producing real dopamine. So if you're deciding, okay, I want to work on my business, I want to do the 80-20 big needle movers to grow my business, then when you're doing that, have some caffeine when you're working, okay? Work in an environment that you really enjoy working in. Work at the times of day when you have the most energy, right? Work at the start of the day when you have a lot of energy, when you feel really good, not at the end of the day when you feel garbage. If you want to get in great shape, then you want to get addicted to going to the gym. So that might mean listening to music while you're in the gym, having caffeine before you go to the gym, being in a good environment when you go to the gym. I remember about 2 years ago, I would wake up at 5 in the morning, Melbourne winter, go outside in my home gym and lift weights in the rain. It was miserable, it was terrible, and I hated it. One of my friends did it with me and he was scarred for at least a year where he didn't want to go to the gym because he had such a bad time. Enhancing these experiences as much as possible allows you to produce more dopamine and trick your brain into thinking that it is some sort of artificial cheap dopamine that you should be addicted to. If we compare real dopamine to enhanced dopamine, what we'll notice is the effort is basically the exact same. The effort isn't going to change much. However, your dopamine goes from on the continuum, on the baseline, the normal, the reality, to off, to a lot higher, to a place that is far above what you would expect to receive, far more dopamine than you would expect to receive from a normal activity. As a result, you're going to get addicted to these behaviors, these actions. And if these are the right actions, then you're going to make some pretty insane progress. So this isn't just theory. I've implemented this system in my life and it has been pretty damn good. In particular, I implemented this for running. This was very, very valuable for running because this was a new thing. It was a new thing to my life, and it's something that if I wanted to make long-term progress, I had to start to do it consistently. I had to be able to execute consistently, and being addicted to running would make that a lot easier. At the end of 2024, I removed cheap dopamine from my life completely. There was nothing that sat off the spectrum, okay? There was absolutely zero cheap dopamine. Now this meant that I wasn't listening to music unintentionally. I wasn't on a drive to the shops listening to music. I wasn't on a walk listening to music. I wasn't accidentally listening to music. It was very, very intentional. At the time, my two options to listen to music was in the gym or going for a run. This meant that those two things that I was doing, going to the gym or running, were really, really amazing. They felt great because I'm not listening to music all the time. It's not just a background noise for me. It's very intentional and it's very intense and it feels really good. This made running a very, very good experience for me. I also decided to only run when the weather was really, really good at its best. Now, this doesn't mean that if it was raining that day, I wasn't gonna run. I was still gonna run, but I would choose the best parts of the day when it was the nicest to do my run, so I enjoyed my run the most. I also tried to run with friends so that when I was doing my run, I was around people I liked. All of these things contributed to the fact that I really enjoyed running. Now, I started running, I was progressing pretty well. I ended up getting an injury which put me out for 2 months, and then I got back on the wagon. Now, bear in mind I hadn't run more than 10 Ks in my life by the start of 2025. After a few months, I decided, okay, I want to run a marathon. I've just come back from a 2-month injury. I'm going to give myself 6 weeks and then I'm going to run a marathon. So not a lot of time. It was a pretty intense period, but I did it. I got it done and I ran my first marathon. And then after that, I said, you know what? I'm so addicted to running. I love this feeling so much. I want to keep running. And I decided to run a marathon every single month. And from that point until today, I've now run 8 marathons in 8 months. This is not possible for most people because most people don't like running. Most people do running as a chore, as something that they have to do because it's good for me. For me, I run because I love running. It's probably my favorite thing to do in my entire life, to go for a run. For most people, this is one of their least favorite things in their life. There's nothing special about me. I'm not a special person. But what I did is I rewired my reward system to make the 80-20 inputs moving me towards my goals, the things that I love doing the most, the things that I'm genuinely addicted to, and enhancing that experience. So it really pushes me over the edge to just want to crave doing it all the time. If this is something that you're going to implement, then there's a few mistakes that I would avoid here. Firstly, not removing cheap dopamine. The reason this works so well is your brain is comparing the effort to reward of every single activity that you do. The reason this is so effective is that the dopamine that you receive for real dopamine activities, the 80-20s, you put above every other activity. If you still have cheap dopamine in your life, no matter how much you want to enhance the real dopamine, the cheap dopamine always feels better. And if the cheap dopamine always feels better, you can never really get addicted to the real dopamine. The first thing you have to do, it's why I made it step 1, is you have to get rid of all the cheap dopamine. Your brain can never be comparing the activities you're doing, the real dopamine, with cheap dopamine, because the cheap dopamine wins every single time. The second one is rewarding garbage activities. The reason that we make it so that you choose the 80-20 activities as the real dopamine and enhance those is that they're the activities that really make a difference. If you decide to try and enhance random activities that are not moving the needle, but I just want to do them, right? They just kind of help, but not that much. Then you're very much diluting the value and the power of the big needle movers. So enhancing the right things is really important. And if you reward garbage, 20, 80 activities, this is not going to be as effective. The final mistake I see is removing the sensitivity to these enhancements. Big example here is if you decide to leverage caffeine to make your work feel better, if you drink a cup of coffee every single day, then it's just going to be normal. The reason that these feel so good, these feel enhanced, is because you do them occasionally. You do them to actually boost, to feel good. If you do them all the time, then it's just normal, right? It's just the absolute default thing to do. If you listen to music all day and then you listen to music when you're working out, it's not going to feel different. If you decide to listen to music while you're working for 4.5 hours, and then you also decide to listen to music when you're going to the gym for an hour and a half, it's not going to be quite the same as if you don't listen to music all day except for when you're at the gym. So doing things like, having a few days a week off caffeine, or very, very specifically choosing music, is going to be far more powerful than just trying to add all the enhancements all the time. If this is something that you want to go really deep on, I imagine you're going to find it quite hard to just remove this cheap dopamine, because it's easy to say remove your addictions, but it's quite hard to remove things you're addicted to. So if you want to install engineered systems that allow you to remove this cheap dopamine from your life without requiring willpower, so that you can execute consistently, then you can join the Modern Monk community. I'll leave a link in the description below for that. I have a challenge for you. The definition of learning is same condition, different behavior. If you've watched this entire video and you haven't changed anything about your behaviors, then you haven't learned anything whatsoever. If you want to get started implementing the system, then the very first step is just getting rid of the cheap dopamine. I honestly think this has been the biggest competitive advantage that I've ever created for myself, getting rid of this stuff. So I think it's a pretty good place for you to start. I think this puts you ahead of just about every single other person. Add step 2 and 3 and you become absolutely indestructible. Actually changing your behaviors is what's going to change your life. I have a video where I run through my entire year living without cheap dopamine and the results that I achieved, which were pretty insane. So if you're interested in how this is going to impact your life, having a look at how this impacted mine would be a pretty good thing to do. So I'll leave the video right here for you to watch. So I'll either see you in that video or in the Modern Monk community. Cheers.